So, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, Joe Biden has now logged 100 full days in office, and a big weird debate has broken out over whether or not he has exceeded expectations. Those were the words of AOC. I call it a weird debate because it obviously matters tremendously where your expectations were set to start with. Mine were quite low, and if he has exceeded them, it has been marginal at best. But I wanted to go through the positives of these critical first 100 days of the Biden administration. So first, they have truly done an excellent job in vaccine administration. In addition, the relief bill was significantly larger than what Obama was able to muster in his own stimulus. It embraced the new politics of direct checks, albeit they perplexingly sent checks to fewer Americans than Trump did and inexplicably decided to cut the amount back from $2,000 to $1,400. I digress. The bill, though, also included some genuinely good, though temporary, programs like a significant child tax credit, additional health care subsidies, and an extension of stepped-up unemployment insurance. Biden also did not waste much time trying to court Republicans and embraced instead a positive idea of bipartisanship, that the opinions of Republican voters matter a hell of a lot more than the opinions of their feckless, bought-off leaders. Another big positive came recently when Biden stood up to the Pentagon and their allies on Capitol Hill and in the press to unequivocally commit to bringing our troops home from Afghanistan. These comments were maybe the best thing that I have heard from him during his presidency so far.
We delivered justice to bin Laden a decade ago, and we've stayed in Afghanistan for a decade since. Since then, our reasons for remaining in Afghanistan have become increasingly unclear, even as the terrorist threat that we went to fight evolved. Over the past 20 years, the threat has become more dispersed, metastasizing around the globe, with the terror threat now in many places, keeping thousands of troops grounded and concentrated in just one country at a cost of billions each year makes little sense to me and to our leaders.
Finally, I appreciate Biden's total normie and extremely offline approach. He does not give a shit about Dr. Seuss. He uses easily understood language rather than the off-putting jargon of so many Democratic politicians. He's either completely oblivious to culture war freakouts or immediately deflates them, as he did with vaccine passports and mask wearing and red meat. On the other hand, there were some big failures in the first 100 days. Why were the checks cut back and means tested? Why did Biden abandon a fight for a minimum wage hike that is wildly overdue and desperately needed? Why in the world did he cede his agenda to the Senate parliamentarian? Why did they instantly cave on taxing rich people and corporations? And finally, it is truly morally outrageous that Biden has continued Trump's policies on refugees and pharma patent protections. And those are just disappointments based on what Biden actually campaigned on, to say nothing of the possibilities of this moment for a broader transformation of the type envisioned by an actual FDR-type agenda or the Bernie Sanders left. But whether you think this early track record was good or scary or middling or where it aligned with your expectations, there are some worrying signs that we've already seen the best of the Biden administration. What do I mean by that? Well, if the Biden administration has exceeded my expectations, it's been in the level of discipline, focus, and competence. Joe Biden has been a lot of things in his career, but disciplined, focused, and competent are nowhere on that list. I mean, we are still talking about this guy.
If you agree with me, go to Joe 30330 and help me in this fight. Thank you very much.
So one interpretation of his early vaccine and relief bill success is that after 40 years, he has finally got the right people around him, learned from his long career, et cetera, et cetera. But there is another interpretation, which is that, look, the relief bill was basically already prepackaged, had a lot of Democratic support solidly behind it to start with, so it didn't actually require all that much competence from Team Biden. And the vaccine rollout was also well on its way when Biden stepped in, and states have had most of the responsibility placed on their shoulders. Perhaps more emblematic of the Biden approach to governance has been his confusing failures with regards to refugee admissions. First, you'll recall, Biden signed an executive order that would lift the cap on those refugee admissions. You'll recall, of course, that Trump had set that cap at a historic low level of just 15,000 people, lower than at any point during the history of the program. So lifting that cap was a central promise of Biden's restoring the soul of America pitch and seemed like an obvious action just to return to historic norms. Agencies booked flights for refugees whose status, by the way, had already been approved, and then nothing happened. Biden, for weeks and weeks and weeks, refused to sign the official directive which would actually begin the process of refugee resettlement. Then he announced that actually he was going to keep the cap at the unconscionable Trump level of just 15,000. After an outcry that Biden's aides apparently had assured him would not arise, the White House quickly reversed that policy. Since then, they've issued a series of confusing and straight-out contradictory justifications for the cap and the thinking behind their actions. As Sam Stein explains here, the original explanation for 15K was a strain on resources, not expectation setting. After they backed off, Psaki conceded a cap is only aspirational. Now they're saying people will think the cap's not aspirational, but an actual target that they'll miss. They're all over the map. So basically, the whole thing's been a giant mess. It's also classic Biden indecision and incompetence. In addition, there are some worrying signs that the infrastructure package and the social welfare package are heading in equally confused directions. David Sirota caught that Biden put out a new fact sheet on his latest social welfare spending plan, which describes a raft of policies from Medicare expansion to a public option to prescription drug pricing reform that are not actually included in that plan he just released. Why would you do that? Meanwhile, they randomly dished in a state tax hike after facing no discernible pressure to do so whatsoever. Then there's just the fact that the administration seems unwilling to do what it takes to actually get anything passed. The deference to the parliamentarian, the abandonment of filibuster reform or elimination, the continued efforts to garner support from Republican leaders for infrastructure, the seeming lack of any plan whatsoever to pass the other social welfare pieces, including universal pre-K, free community college, and of course the PRO Act. So perhaps Biden has turned over a new effective and capable leaf, and perhaps he's already peaked, reaching the apex of what he is likely to accomplish as president. I'm not going to predict what the political consequences of that would be. If the economy roars and people feel good with their vaccinations, he might not be punished at the polls, or you could look at his already so-so approval rating and see doom for a party that has significant disadvantages in the coming midterms. All I can tell you is that America desperately needs more than the inadequate Band-Aid and back-to-brunch agenda which has been accomplished so far. But I fear what we've seen is about all we're gonna get. After all, blunders and missteps would be a return to normal for Biden. And so, Emily, look, I think if we look forward practically and pragmatically and realistically at the remainder of the Biden agenda as has been laid out, I see very little chance that the social welfare agenda he's laid out is going to ultimately pass. That would be universal pre-K, free community college. That would include tax hikes on the rich that some Democrats, of course, every Republican balks at, but some Democrats are even balking at. You've got to get it by Manchin and Sinema. Seems tough to do, and I haven't even heard like a realistic path to getting it done. Meanwhile, on infrastructure, they're kind of messing around at this point. They've been meeting with Republicans, acting like maybe they're going to go the bipartisan route before they'd signal they're going to do this through reconciliation. I do think that it is very possible they'll get some portion of infrastructure through probably a watered-down version of what they proposed. But you're starting to see those early days, which seemed like they were kind of rocking and rolling and things were being handled effectively and competently, which again, if he exceeded my expectations, that's in the area. You're now starting to see a little bit of more of how I expected the Biden administration to unfold.
Yeah, it's not surprising. And I think actually they would be smart to break some of these comprehensive plans up. And we see that happen sometimes as the process goes on. But if you want to pass certain aspects of, as you lay out, the social welfare agenda, it'd be much easier to break these things up and force Republicans to vote on universal pre-K or any of those things. It's a much harder vote for Republicans than a giant bill that they can sort of sweeten with loopholes or with other, things for special interest groups and all of that, all the goodies that usually come with those types of things.
See, I disagree with that because I think Republicans will vote against it anyway. So to me, voters judge you on what you actually do. They don't care about the process. They don't care about the filibuster. They don't care about the Senate parliamentarian. They don't ultimately care about bipartisanship. They care about whether they feel that it has directly impacted their lives. So something like universal pre-K, something like God, making childcare affordable, that would be a revolution for working class people. I think doing what it takes to get it done is the way to actually be successful, to have a high approval rating, and to set yourself up for midterm success. I don't see the willingness to do what it takes right now to do those things.
If I wanted to pass something like that, I would get Marco Rubio and Sherrod Brown in a room with Joe Biden and work on a slim package for universal pre-K or for something to that extent, and to see where the common ground is. And what's interesting, to your point, is as you lay out, he's putting his best foot forward, and we saw that in his joint address. But as we've seen it play out in Congress, there are signs, exactly as you mentioned, that he is not as committed to really, what he is willing to listen to Jamie Dimon. He is willing to listen and make compromises, which a lot of people really like about Biden. But if you think that he's actually going to do everything that he says he's going to do, you've got another thing coming, because he is the Washington establishment incarnate. I mean, he is the perfect mascot for Washington, D.C. So I think if I were progressive, I would say, well, cost-benefit analysis here, maybe Joe Biden will actually, he's the best chance in this sort of 2021 post-Trump era of getting anything done.
Right.
Because, maybe it would just be impossible to bring anybody to the table under Elizabeth Warren or whatever it is. But at the same time, no, he's not going to pass the progressive agenda as he describes it. There's just no way.
Yeah, I think the political implications to me are really interesting, and I genuinely don't know which way it goes. Some days I think, look, he has good timing. Like, even forget about his policies or anything you like or don't like, etc. He's coming in to office at a time when people are starting to feel better. They're getting vaccinated. They're able to take their masks off outside. They're feeling like, okay, we might have a somewhat normal summer. Job growth has been good. And again, look, I think he could be doing a lot more. But just from the timing alone, he comes in at a good moment, and that is usually a good thing for presidents. On the other hand, Republicans have a lot of structural advantages. Biden would have to, and the Democrats would have to, match the best performance in modern history of the party that holds power's first midterms, just to be able to hold on to the House. Redistricting is going to set back their chances, and just historical norms and the fact that there's usually a backlash in those first midterms make the task extraordinarily difficult for them. So then when I think about those things, I think, gosh, he's only at 53% approval rating. Yeah, that's better than Trump, but that's still nothing to write home about. So they may be in trouble for the midterm. So I kind of go back and forth on whether he actually needs to do more than what he's already done in order to have a decent midterms.
Well, you have the senator from Delaware, a longtime senator from Delaware, in office at a time when the Democratic Party is now more responsive to the suburban, educated coalition of people and proposing a $6 trillion spending plan, essentially, at the end of the day. So, and by the way, Joe Biden, longtime senator from Delaware, is bringing Wall Street into the White House to have conversations with them and see where there might be common ground, see what they can get on board with, see what they want, listen to them. I mean, of course, they said, what Axios reported last week after he met with them at the White House, they were just glad that his tax plan wasn't going back up to the pre-Trump level.
Yeah.
Like they thought it was going to be worse. And so they're going to find new ways to get around it. I mean, that's always what happens when you try to eliminate loopholes. They just find different loopholes, or they hide more of their money. So, I mean, I just don't see this as a populist moment. Definitely. I think there's a lot of radical talk, and I think, the party at its core is getting more and more left, absolutely, but I don't think this moment is going to produce a ton of far left policy, because you have Joe Biden, a man who's very friendly with Wall Street, and you have this Democratic coalition of people in the suburbs who used to maybe vote Republican and have voted Republican in the past. When that $6 trillion messaging kicks in from Republicans, this is going to be a tougher sell.
Interesting. We will see if he's able to get anything done from here. All right, Emily, looking forward to your radar. That's next.